decriminalization. That has given Donald Trump the tool to break families apart.
If a mother and a child walk thousands of miles on a dangerous path, in my view, they are not criminals.
If we decriminalize, we'll have multiples of that. Obama's Homeland Security Secretary that said that.
2020 White House hopefuls promising to decriminalize border crossings if elected. But won't incentives like that only make the border crisis even worse?
Here to explain is Vice President for Foreign Policy at the Heritage Foundation, Jim Carafano. Thanks for coming on this morning, Jim. All right, we're talking about decriminalizing crossing the border and then also offering free college and health care. Will this exacerbate the problem that we already have?
Yeah, so that's a really good place to start, because we should unpack and say, what does that really mean? And you guys know I do policy, not politics. I'm not partisan, so I can't rack and stack candidates for you. But when somebody says, let's decriminalize, well, what do you mean by that? Are you still going to deport people? Because if you are, decriminalizing doesn't make a difference. If you're not, then essentially you're for open borders. But here's what we do know. As soon as you say any incentive like, I'm going to decriminalize, and even if people don't know what that means, just like when President Obama gave DACA, that is a huge magnet encouraging more people to come here illegally. So that could literally be a tsunami.
Jim, you just a couple seconds ago heard Bernie Sanders saying if a mother and her child is to walk thousands of miles here, you know, and he finished the rest of it. I'm not going to say it word for word, but, you know, you heard that. You heard a lot of that type of argument last night. But what you're not hearing about from a lot of Democrats are the fact that there are gang members, there are criminals, there are drugs, like all the bad stuff that's also coming across the border. It's like I almost feel like some people have blinders on.
Well, look, this is where I really get to express my anger. You probably saw the report the other day of the guy that put a seesaw on the border so kids could play. If a parent is dragging a kid thousands of miles across the border, what they are doing is child endangerment. Children die, they're raped, they're murdered, they're taken hostage, they suffer dehydration, they get diseases. It's horrific. It's a massive humanitarian crisis. And encouraging people to do that with their children, I think that's horrible. And I think this is creating the biggest humanitarian crisis imaginable. Here's my big problem. What do Americans really want? And there's a lot of data on this. They worry about the public safety issues. They worry about the fairness issues. They worry about the humanitarian crisis. They worry about why do people get to jump the line? Why do some people have to obey the law and others don't? And they worry about the fiscal burden on taxpayers. None of what was discussed last night addressed any of the three concerns of the majority of Americans, and this is the top issue among voters.
All right, let's move on to a second topic here. We're going to move on to foreign policy for a second. Talking about North Korea and the fact that the president has decided to meet with Kim Jong-un. Tim Ryan from Ohio had a big problem with that. What do you make of it?
Yeah, I got to tell FDR and Reagan next time I see him they shouldn't talk to dictators. Look, particularly in the world in which we live today, they call it the era of great power competition, although not all these powers are great. But we talk about China, North Korea, Iran, and Russia. All of them are dictatorships. If you're basically saying, well, I don't want to talk to any of those guys, well, what are you going to do? Are you going to fight wars with them? Are you going to ignore them because you can't do that? I think what President Trump has brought to the table is, I want to tell these people, I'm going to push back on one hand. They have to respect America's interests. But if they do that, we can find a way to get along. I don't know if there's another practical strategy in the world. I think lots of people are going to be talking to these countries because they have to. And that's, I think, what's actually just reasonable statesmanship.
Okay. James, thank you so much.
Thank you for joining us. Appreciate it.
Thanks.
All right.